Hello flower friends! In today's video I'm going to show you how to make an evergreen wreath on a wire frame with hand wire. My name's Ellen Frost. I'm the owner of Local Color Flowers and I've been a florist for over 15 years. I write a weekly newsletter all about flowers, which you should definitely check out because it's really good. And I also host an online community called Flower More for flower nerds who want more flowers in their life. So today I'm going to show you how to make a hand-wired wreath. I have been teaching probably half a dozen or more hand-tied wreath classes every year for the past 10 years. I have made tons and tons of these wreaths and I'm excited to share today how I make them. So I'm starting out with a wire wreath frame. This is a 12-inch frame. You could really use any kind of wreath frame you wanted. If you wanted to use a grapevine wreath, if you wanted to make a wreath out of willows, any sort of natural materials, if you wanted to use a wood frame, you can use any kind of frame you want. So this is a 12-inch wire frame, and this particular frame you can get at a craft store or even at the dollar store sometimes. And I'm going to be using this soft gauge wire. This is a 26 gauge wire, and you could use between, I think, about a 22 and a 26 gauge. You don't want anything too strong because you want to be able to manipulate the wire pretty easily. So this is my preferred wire. I also like to use a paddle. So this is what you call a wire paddle. Unlike a roll, usually the rolls are pretty big and they can get tangled. So I like to use the paddle. It's a little more manageable. And if you're teaching a class, it's easy for everybody to just have their own small paddles. So the first thing I want to do is I want to attach my wire to the frame. So I'm just going to take the end of my wire and I'm going to attach it to one of these inner frames. And I'm just going to twist tie it. It doesn't have to be tied in a knot or anything like that. You just want it twist tied it on there so that it's tight, and when you pull it, it doesn't come off. When you're doing your wiring, you are never going to cut your wire. So you're going to just wire and then set it down. Not cut it. If you do cut it on accident, sometimes I've done that, you can tie it back together. But for the most part, we're going to wire, set our wire down, wire, set our wire down. And the other thing I want to say before we start wiring is that you want to keep the wire pretty taut. So you don't want to let it unravel a lot because that's when it can get twisted. So as you're wiring, keep it as taut as you can. So wiring, but keeping it nice and tight. So I'm going to set my frame aside so that I can start to assemble my evergreen bunches. So the way that I assemble my bunches is to first start to chop up my evergreens. And I want to be thinking of them in about, 6 to 8 inch pieces. Like this size is about right. And they don't have to be cut, very perfectly. You can use tips like I'm going to on this one. You can use the bottom part of the branch. I do like to sometimes clean up the bottom a little bit. That does help with wiring, but you don't have to. This is some magnolia. You can use the tip of the magnolia. However, if you're using the bottom piece, make sure that you don't let this cut show in your wreath because that can be kind of an ugly eyesore. So you want to just keep it flush with the branch, and then we're going to hide that cut if we can. So you can see I'm using a lot of different textures and a lot of different color greens. So we've got the magnolia with this dark green. We've got this arborvitae with sort of a brighter green. This is the gray owl. It is almost white, right? Like it's a very dusty green. And then we have this spruce that's just like a medium green. And then my last green I'm going to use is actually my favorite evergreen of the season. This is blue ice cypress. This is the first time I'm saying that. There has been some controversy about whether this is a cedar or a cypress, but now I believe that it is blue ice cypress. And you can read more about that in my newsletter, where I talk all about the blue ice. So I'm going to use some of these tips, and then I'm going to use some of this bushier bottom in my bunch. So now that I've got my pieces cut, I'm going to assemble my bunch the way that I want it to show up on the frame. So the magnolia, I want to make sure that I can see some of the green and some of this brown back. And then I'm just going to assemble the bunches in my hand. And there's no, magic way to do this. You can make the bunches however thick or however thin you like. And you can always sneak in these little small side shoots if you want. So for me, this is like a good size bunch. So once I have my bunch, I'm going to duplicate this about 12 times. So you can make your bunches exactly the same, or you can vary them. All right, I have all of my bunches made now. They have the same base materials in every bunch, so all of the evergreens I just showed you. But then in 4 bunches, I added some red winterberry or red ilex. I also, for 4 bunches, added a little bit of German statice, which is a dried flower that has a tiny little white flower on it. And I really like it because it does have like a little bit of a snow feeling to it. And then 4 bunches I just left as evergreens. All right, so I've got my wire frame prepped and I've got my low gauge wire attached. And I'm going to start with my first bunch. Like I said, I'm going to assemble it in my hand how I like it. And if you need to, you can always trim the bottoms a little bit. Mostly you want to make sure that you have enough stem that your bunch doesn't slide out from under the wire, but not too much stem that it makes the whole wreath too thick. So you can see where I'm holding it. I call this the pinch point. And this is really the place where you want to wire. So right where your hand is holding, like if you were holding a little bouquet, there's maybe 1 inch or 2 inches below the pinch point. So that's where you want the wire to go around. So I'm going to place my first bunch on my frame. And I'm going to use the frame as a guide. I'm going to take these stems and I'm going to make sure that they line up with the frame. And my greens are kind of angled out and my stems are within the frame. So I'm wiring around the pinch point and I'm going to go around maybe 3 or 4 times, nice and tight. So remember I said keep your wire taut. All right, so you've got your first bunch on. That is usually, the first and second bunch are tricky. The rest of them are pretty easy, and the last bunch can be tricky. So the first one is on, and it's in the right place. I'm gonna do my next one with berries. So I'm gonna alternate my berries throughout. So I'm gonna take my second bunch, and I'm gonna lay it right on top of my first bunch. And this may seem awkward because it almost is like you're covering up most of that bunch. But you really want to cover up, and just like I said, you're going to angle your greens out and make sure your stems are in line with your frame. I'm going to go ahead and wire on my next bunch. I'm putting it right on top, and you can see why it's important to have your berries nice and tall so that they don't get covered up. As you're getting closer to the end of your wreath, you might be thinking, oh, I only have space for 1 more bunch. I know I always tell people in my class, when you think you're almost done, you're probably still a few bunches away. So you can see I'm actually even like lifting my first bunches to make sure I have enough room to fit these last bunches in. Hold up my first bunch. So I'm going to slide it off the table a little bit. Once I feel like it's slid in there, this way with two people it's a little bit easier because some person can wire and one person can hold. Alright, so let's see. I think it's looking pretty good. So to tie it off, I'm going to flip my entire wreath over. And don't worry, your wreath should be nice and secure. I'm going to cut my wire. I'll take my gloves off for this. And then I'm going to attach my wire to the back of the frame. Just tie it off, or you can really even just twist tie it around the frame. You just want to make sure it's attached nice and tight so that it doesn't come loose after you hang it and after the materials start to dry. There you have it, an evergreen wreath made with all locally sourced evergreens, berries, dried flowers, and a very simple velvet ribbon. Happy holidays.